We're starting the meeting because we're 3 minutes late already.
Okay,
Okay,
but anyway, I've
Anglo
kept
Sikh.
up. Anglo-Sikh Heritage
Got it.
Trail.
thank you.
Have fun.
Thank you.
All right, see you later.
Excellent.
I thought I was going to pass.
So good evening and welcome to the Finance Committee meeting being held Tuesday, 21st of February at the slightly earlier time of 5:30. We are a couple of minutes late starting, apologies, but we are underway. So we'll kick off with the first item on the agenda, which is declarations of any disclosable pecuniary interest to receive any additional interest not all registered. Should anything come up in the course of the conversations, please do feel free to declare. We go on to 67822. Apologies for absence. I believe we've had them from councillors Harvey, Brame and Crawford.
Yep.
Yes. So super. Thank you very much. If you'd like to pass that down to Barbara to sign in, that'd be lovely. We then move on to the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 24th of January, which were received by full council on the 31st of January and to be signed as a true and accurate record. We've all seen them. Are we all happy with those? Fantastic. Right, we move on to 68022, which is the contracts update. The report has been circulated in advance. It hasn't actually changed from the last time, has it? So are we happy to duly note?
Yes.
Thank you. We then move on to committee financial decisions. Again, the report is for noting and highlight December 22. That was previously there, wasn't it? That was on the previous.
It was.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's no further updates on that yet. Obviously, there's always slightly a lag because as efficient as Alan is, it's not fair to get him to do everything that they did this month. So any questions or queries on that piece, please?
No.
We then move on to 68222, which is the approval of payments. Again, that's resolved item of business should we approve it. Are there any questions, queries or comments on that piece, please?
No.
Super. And the recommendation is that the making of these payments be approved by this committee. Can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Barbara. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Mac. All those in favour? Trinity does it. Okay. We then move on to the financial report for the 10 months ended the 31st of January. Again, these have been circulated in advance. Alan has provided, as always, a fantastic, insightful commentary to that. Obviously, the income is higher than budgeted and there are significant overspends. So we are, whilst currently looking at a net surplus, there is possible, as we mentioned last month, hesitancy about overconfidence in that surplus converting to a surplus at year end. We don't think it will. A deficit is likely to be incurred for the year end, and our recent forecasting confirmed it, and that reflects the changes in inflation when the budget was obviously set and the challenging circumstances that we all find ourselves in at the moment. The recommendation is that the committee notes the financial report for the 10 months ended 31st of January 2023, and that committees and the senior management team will continue to need to contain expenditure wherever possible. On that basis, are there any questions, queries or comments from the items on there, please?
No.
Barbara.
Just 5136, the waste disposal costs. It says billing is higher, overloading fines involved. Are those high? You know, it's a significant amount. So is there steps in place to stop that happening again?
The fines are coming through. They're not significant in the sense that they're hundreds and hundreds of pounds, they're typically 15 or 20 pounds. The problem when we get the notifications, it's so difficult to work out where it was and to take action. So they come in flurries and then they disappear again. But what's the main driver is because we're not on a contract, there's a fluctuation of costs. So our costs have been rising slightly, which we did not expect. But it took us a long time to work out whether we were under contract or not, because we wanted to go out and test the market and look at have a total review of the waste disposal, and we can now start that process.
So in terms of flash to ban, we've identified that we're not in contract.
Yeah.
When can we expect the tendering process to start?
We are looking at we want to get someone in who can help us look at the various elements of waste, because we have bottles. Or at the moment, all our stuff, all our waste goes into basically general waste. We don't have bottles, we don't have cardboard, we don't have paper. So we want someone to come in and actually just advise us and say, look, you can look at that, and it might not necessarily be the same supplier, but this is probably the way to structure your waste. And subsequent, we are today, on Friday, someone actually phoned me, one of the public sector buying organisations, and they'll come and do an evaluation of our waste for us and tell us what we could be looking at.
I think that's a key aspect, because within certain organisations, I don't know if we would be eligible for it, but there are waste credits to be had. I know it used to be the fact that if you had a baler with a significant amount of cardboard, you could sell that cardboard back effectively. It would pay for the baler and the collection costs, and it would be cost neutral effectively. So I think in the interest of the public purse, it's essential that we do look at this appropriately, and then also tie it in with our environmental policy. If it's all going into general waste, ultimately it's either going into landfill or for burning. And that's not a good use of our resources when these items can be really cost effectively recycled, and we can actually demonstrate a reduction of waste that's going into those processes and is being reused and can form part of this council's environmental policy. So I think that's, that consultancy piece is key. Do they have an indication of how long that will take? Because I'm mindful, if we're not in contract, that's going to be costing us money short term. And the sooner we can get into contract, the sooner the potential savings for us and the planet.
They've asked for a Teams meeting with us within the next 2 weeks. And because people have been on leave, it's just that partly we at the end of our leave here, so everyone is using the opportunity to take leave. It's been quite hard to organise. But I would hope to have something set up within the next 2 weeks.
And then, so meeting next 2 weeks, potentially another couple of weeks for something to fall out of it. And the tender process normally takes how long?
But we would have to look at advertising from a minimum of 30 days.
Okay. So realistically, we're looking probably another 2 months before we can get this resolved. Okay, so that's going to have a significant impact. Barbara.
Another point on 5200 bar purchases. In the comments, it says it's receiving SMT attention. Is there a time frame on that?
I think what we have discovered is that there is something wrong in our bar. I think part of it is just the routine stock checking that we haven't, that we need to improve on. So that there is processes that should be happening any minute now. So it's one of those things that it is on the agenda.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll get something in place. We do a big stock take at the end of the year, but by then we need to make sure that whatever processes we put in place are actually working.
Yeah. And toilet expenditure, that seems like really luxury soap for that amount of money. So I presume the amenities committee are looking at that. And the only other thing was the 5907, the missing credit card information. What steps are in place to rectify that?
Yes, that's a new line.
Yeah.
In fairness, I haven't had a chance to have a discussion with the town clerk. We just hadn't. I mean, town clerk only came back to leave today. I got leave for the week. But what it is we actually have a problem. So it's a matter of we just have to address it. We can't allocate it. It's just to put it there somewhere so it gets properly reviewed and then it gets signed off, because we have to address that particular issue.
Yeah, it's good that you've put it as a new line for it now, so we can monitor it monthly to see, if there are any issues that need to be addressed.
But like I said, I haven't had the permission of the town clerk to do that. I've just done it because I had to get my credit cards were not reconciled, and I had to get them reconciled.
I can understand the problem, because you pay for something and you can't always identify. You see the name on your statement, and trying to reconcile. It must be a nightmare.
I think it'll be something that we'll pick on in our next couple of agenda items as well.
Right.
Any further questions on the financial report, please, team?
That's fine.
So are we all happy to, approve and to note the financial report?
Yes.
Excellent. So we move on to 68422, which is the internal control review. We're required annually to complete an annual governance statement, an AGS, which forms part of the annual governance and accounting return.
Annual governance and statement, and accountability.
There you go, accountability return. Yeah, there we go. See, even remember that. So that's the piece once a year, where what we do and how we do it gets signed off. And it's quite a high level document that's basically a yes or no answer will suffice. But we've been very mindful that underpinning that needs to be an internal control review. We're required to carry out an internal control review, and it made sense to dovetail the requirements from the AGS to that and use it as a tool to reassure council that, you know, appropriate measures are in there, and being mindful of what you've just said about credit card controls. Is there an aspect, I think we ought to direct the internal control councillors that do review that to specifically look at that. Obviously, we have the template there, so there will be opportunity to have that featured in there, and that was used last year, and it felt quite reassuring that we could present that to council to reinforce what has happened. Are there any questions or queries, please, team?
If I can just comment, I think the template that we distributed, there are 3 areas that are highlighted in yellow, and those are the 3 areas that we really have to focus on going forward. So I can't hand on heart, say that we've got these things in place, that they should be working as well they are. There's just 3 areas. It's the ordering system. It's just not working as it should be. Our goods receiving system is not working as well as it should be. So there's always a risk that we pay for goods that we haven't received. And the last thing is cash is quite dangerous for us, and it's how we minimise the use of cash receipts. People will always use cash, but we've really just got to make sure that we minimise our exposure to cash, because that's a high risk area. And with all the local banks closing down, it becomes even more difficult to handle. And I will add credit cards.
Yeah, I think that kind of falls within that remit, because it does mention credit card receipts and test compliances on a sample basis. If you're already highlighting, that's demonstrating that that system isn't working somewhere along the line. So the decision is to, 1, approve that template. Are we happy to?
Yeah, I think so. The one thing I would say about all the bar stuff is it does sound like a lot of staff issues that's causing some of that. I'm guessing. So this isn't just a finance issue, is it? It's a, ability to staff, correctly do be stock take, have the people there to be able to do all that.
A training need identified?
There is. But I think it might be a deficiency in them, our staff are double hatted. That's just an observation. I think we've got to accept it.
So if we're agreed on that template, we need to nominate councillors that would be asked to undertake the internal control review before the 31st of March. Any volunteers? Year end. There isn't a prescription on numbers, is there?
No.
So if you're rammed, Mac, and I'm mindful that you're doing a lot of work at the moment on the Walgrave side of things.
I'm never going to fit that in. If I promise to do it, I won't.
No, that's fine. So actually, if Barbara and I pick that up with yourself, is that okay? And then we can just get a
I have to
date.
include
It has to include it has to include the RFO.
Yeah.
So that's the responsible financial officer. Basically, buck stops there. So yes. So yeah, if we can get a 4-way meeting organised for that and challenge sample testing and go from there. So is that okay if it's just Barbara and myself? Are you happy with that?
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to. I mean, is that process, sort of a series of meetings?
No, it's one.
For me.
In
Really?
theory, I mean, I could fit something in if we're just a bit canny about how we do it.
Okay, so what we'll do then is if we get some dates circulated, see if they jive for you.
Yeah.
If not, Barbara and I'll just crack on with it.
Okay. I mean, it's probably a little bit late, but somewhere in that last week, I can.
So last week of March.
Yeah.
See what we can do. Happy?
Happy.
Excellent. So we then move on to agenda item 68522, financial risk assessment. The objective today is to review the financial risk assessment that was distributed to yourselves recently and published with this agenda on the website. The decision required is to recommend the adoption of the financial risk assessment to full council. They have the final sign off on this. I would like to spend some time going through it and see if there's anywhere that perhaps we've missed something, risks that perhaps we feel have now been mitigated, so no longer need to feature on there, or have been reduced perhaps to an operational rather than strategic, and just be mindful of that. So we have already done some amendments to this. The additional risks that have been identified for the forthcoming year are the risk of higher inflation on input cost, particularly in respect of the energy costs. Obviously, that was reflected from what we knew and could guess for the budget setting process, but mindful always of the great saying, we don't know what we don't know, and budgeting is best guess and choices. The council's existing energy contracts expires on the 30th of September, and the rates for longer term contracts are expected to increase fivefold. I've had conversations with my business utility providers, and they're telling me my rates were fixed a couple of summers ago and they could either double or triple at the moment, but also mindful of the news that was literally released this morning that prices are expected to go up again in April. However, I'm not really understanding that when wholesale costs are through the floor at the moment. So, yeah,
Pre-COVID levels.
interesting times. But obviously, we can only do what we can do, so we need to be mindful of that market. There's also the risk associated with the use of online accounts and the continued access to those accounts. There's a need to develop account opening protocols to mitigate those risks. And obviously, we heard about some of the challenges at our last meeting that Alan has experienced in terms of being able to even just talk to someone at banks recently. 3, there are fewer operational financial risks associated with the change in processes. These include, there are a few, sorry. They need to include the need for a service level agreement with the agents monitoring the council's leases, and the need to improve credit vetting for new customers using the council's cemetery services. And then finally, the inclusion of the new SUE in Croxton that is transferred to Thetford Town Council on the 1st of April. It might result in unfunded obligations, but we need to understand what that looks and feels like. The income has been budgeted for because that was reflected in our tax base figures that came through from Breckland that formed part of our budget setting process, but there's not been any additional expenditure added to that. We don't know what that looks and feels like, and potentially for some of our, ultimately, possibly it's for some of our events, but we're always mindful within the town that we do draw in from the hinterlands anyway and surrounding villages. So we might not see that much, and we do try and draw in wider than Thetford and make us a tourist destination. So there is kind of an offset balance on that as well. So being mindful of what we might inherit. Part of that has been mitigated. It did come to both planning and full council, if I recollect correctly, the request for this town council to fund lighting on the SUE, and this council made a decision that it would not. So that's gone back to developers and is within that conversation. If we go through, have you got any points that you would like to raise at all? I'll start on page 1. We'll go through it. So just for reference, Alan, L of O is likelihood of occurrence and I on C is impact on council.
Correct.
Right, there we go. Remembered it. So page 1. On, go on.
It's a budget in monitoring. I'm surprised that is amber, if I'm honest. Bearing in mind what we've had in the run up to this.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we're here for, to challenge this. So if you feel that we have enough control measures in place to mitigate either the likelihood of occurrence or the impact on the council, we can do that.
Don't know whether it's going to make any odds.
I think it's probably a strong thing to keep it as a amber warning on that, because just being mindful.
Yeah, okay.
On page 2. Can we amend 1.7, please?
0.7.
In terms of likelihood and impact, we've just discussed the inability to fully reconcile credit cards, failure to ensure adequate council scrutiny over payments made. If we're not able to do that,
And 1.8 to keep credit cards in. The rest of the processes are working very well. So I'd hate to
okay,
disguise
muddy that.
It's our credit card expenditure is 12,000, 13,000 pounds a year. Other expenditures, hundreds of thousands a year.
Yeah.
So if I can keep them separate, if you don't mind.
I think that would be appropriate. Are you happy with that,
Yep.
team? We move on to page 3. I have to say what's glaring at me is 2.3. Failure to recover monies due to the council by GW Stanforth. This has been on our risk register for some time. This has been an ongoing issue for a considerable amount of time. And the bottom line is GW Stanforth owe the town council money. Were it any other organisation, we would be looking at pre-action protocols, because it's just silly. So do we, I mean, I know it says there's ongoing efforts. I'd like to see a date on here, and we need to hold Stanforth Trust to account on this.
I mean, if I can just indirectly provide it, I've been just with the chairman of the trust often. We have tried about 4 different ways to do that. The last one, which we started, is we actually having to close the account at GW Stanforth. And once it's closed, the money will be transferred to another account owned by GW Stanforth. And the chairman is in the process of getting those signatures. Our biggest risk, and this is again something that is the trustees who are signatories are no longer trustees. So it's a little bit more difficult to get them signing. And this is this whole risk that we have about keeping organisational information up to date. It really has to be prioritised in terms of our procedures. And what we're trying to do is get the officers to have mandates to administer the accounts, not necessarily to approve payments. And that's what we're also trying to do.
I'd like to see a target resolution date on this.
I will put one.
What do we feel as a committee would be appropriate? I'm thinking within 3 months of a change of council, so May, June, July. Yeah, by the end of July, please.
Nothing happens in our, yeah, July.
End of July.
Yeah.
Please, because
I will create a paper trail to show that we're actually
Yeah.
that are doing something. And I'll make sure that if you don't mind, Chair, that you copied into those.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate. Because it's gone on long enough. This situation was pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Because really, if that money owed, if we invested that, we would have lost the interest. So, you know, anyone else saying, if you don't pay, we want some interest on that because we, you know.
What's the sum roughly?
At the moment, it's 150,000, but I'm able to reduce it as the investment income comes in. We're actually transferring it back. I checked the bank account Friday, and there was about £8,000, and that's after regular transfer. So we do have the opportunity to transfer monies from the trust to the town council. The indebtedness went up about 210,000 at one stage. So we have.
So that's 8,000 paid off, not left.
Well, it was 210,000, it's now 150,000.
Yes.
But the money comes in quite regularly now that we're able to knock off £20,000, possibly every month, and hopefully it'll be such that all the rental income goes, we have access to, all the investment income we have access to, and that's what we're taking out of trusts.
I'm just
Can't
really mindful that that's liquid funds that this council hasn't been able to access and has potentially had an impact. You know, we had the presentation before this meeting on our investments. You know, had things not been so prudently financially managed, we could be in a very different situation with having to draw down and reduce our investments because of the lack of management by an external charity. So, yeah. Anything else on page 3, please, team?
No.
Go on to page 4. I think we might need to flag something in there because, again, that credit card issue has been identified. 2.6 is risk of misappropriation. I think there is an associated risk, no matter how well we think of the team, there is a risk exposure there. So I think there's something that needs to be there, and the risk value needs to go up in the short term because that needs to be resolved, and commentary put in there, please. Anything else, team, on that page?
No, I agree, because you've already said that, you know, there's a risk at having too much cash in, so it's the same thing.
Yeah, and we've
If we've got that screen.
so on to page 5. Can I highlight 3.5, please? So where are we at with the valuation for War Memorial Statue and Civic Regalia? Because if I remember rightly, we had advice from the insurers that ultimately that wasn't technically necessary.
I have to follow that up.
Okay.
Follow that up.
And if we could put a note on there that the insurance is renewed June 2023. So realistically, that is the time.
Yes.
So I would like to have an implemented date of June 2023 on there, please.
I'll let that.
Thank you. Anything else on there, please?
No.
Being mindful of something that you mentioned earlier regarding lease, I mentioned earlier about leases. Where am I? Is it on this one? Service level agreement, is that reflected? Prepare a service level agreement, yes. So in 3.6, we've got that reflection, so that's good.
We are planning a meeting round in mid-March.
Yeah, so that's got done by end of March, so we'll be happy with that. Yeah. Good. Anything else on page 5?
No.
Page 6.
I think the Charles Barrel Centre at 3.7 is quite a worry for me. I don't know. I don't know enough about it, and I don't get any feedback. And you know, you get the impression they're doing well, but I just get it's feeling that we could be in, you know, quite a difficult place if something doesn't go well that we're not aware of. I don't know.
So when was the last time that we received a report of all the tenants that are in the Charles Barrel Centre, please?
At the committee level, we never time that I've been here. I'm not too sure what the protocol when it comes to committee, whether it just goes to the town clerk. I have never seen a listing.
So a requirement of the lease is a monthly report from the CBC to Thetford Town Council of who are the tenants.
I mean,
it's been requested in the past and hasn't been forthcoming.
It's difficult knowing the history, because obviously this was set up years ago, but as an existing councillor now, I just feel I have this responsibility, but I don't know enough information. So
no, and it's quite a tricky situation because we are a leasee sandwich. So on the one side we have Norfolk County Council, who we have the lease with, and then with Norfolk County Council's agreement, there is a sublease of the centre to the Charles Barrel Centre. I can't remember which form it takes. It's not a charity. It's not a CIC. It's a registered thing, but it is actually listed on Companies House as a reference, and then it's actually formally registered elsewhere.
It might be nice for new councillors, because obviously they'll come across the same situation. You know, the new year have like an information booklet, exactly. You know, even if it's one sheet, to say this is where the council stands on it, because you know, if it's nice to have a look at what the expectations are.
And so monitoring and reporting procedures between CBC and TTC officers are established and continually being developed. It says persons responsible, clerk and finance committee. This finance committee has not seen any of that reporting. So I would suggest that we need to up that risk and report. Okay, implemented by reporting required to finance committee for the next meeting date, please.
Sure. It's just in case you.
I mean, of all of the things we've got listed in here, I read through this yesterday. Everything that we've listed in here, that's the biggest going concern, the busiest thing happening. And I don't understand what our role in it is. I don't understand why we are the go-between between the two.
My understanding is it was a facilitation to enable the setup, and actually Thetford Town Council were bold and innovative in saying, yes, this has a community use. And I can remember officers at the time, and it was before I was a member of the Town Council, worked incredibly hard to ensure, you know, that there was an opportunity to develop a community asset for the benefit of the whole of the Thetford community. The plan always was, and minutes of meetings back in 2016, I think it was, refer to a short-term arrangement, because the goal always was that Thetford Town Council would then stand back and CBC would stand on its own feet. Sadly, that has never happened, and we're still in this halfway point. There was an opportunity a while ago to perhaps disentangle, and the challenge was then that Norfolk County Council made a commercial decision and a physical decision that they would no longer offer peppercorn rents on their assets. If there was a community value involved, it would be at market value. And there was a resistance within the council to change those terms because of the impact that it may possibly have on the Charles Barrel. So nothing happened. And I think we need to be very, very mindful how the community benefits are perceived by our community. And we are kind of a middleman with no control whatsoever,
That's a
but all the responsibility. And I think that risk, I think the impact on the council will be incredibly higher than that. And I think actually the likelihood of occurrence is higher of us being exposed to risk.
Change that to a 3.
I'd like to see likelihood of occurrence changed to a 3, and yeah, because then that gives us a 9, and that's a glaring red flag. And then that's a tool also being mindful that a new administration comes in May, you know, it's flagged and ready for them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to see them, you know.
Don't want to see them fail.
No, I don't want to
Absolutely
see them
not.
fail, but I just think they're probably turning over more than we are. You know, it seems ridiculous, the amount of business they've got going through
Yeah.
there.
And we, it's saying we're responsible. This finance committee has never seen any reporting on it. So if we're responsible as per this, we need to see the reporting. So if we get that on the next meeting, and then we can establish a protocol for that. 3.8, I think we've demonstrated that we're managing that quite well with conversations and meetings that we've had and resolutions that have happened within here.
Just to update, that resolution has been communicated back. So
Fantastic. Okay, 3.9. Is that what you're whistling at as well, Mac? How reasonable do we believe that risk is? Has there been any correspondence from any allotment holders that that risk is possible?
it hasn't. I think.
And that's a new risk.
That is a new risk.
Mm-hmm.
We've recovered, our allotment recovery is actually exceptionally high. I don't think it's ever been as high as it has been, and that would include Munford Road. It's just what happens next year. You know, it's the timing of the results of the feasibility study. If that happens before October, then this becomes a risk. So that possibly the likelihood of occurrence could be lower. The impact on the council would also be low. I mean, allotments has a total budget of £8,000.
Yeah, I don't think there's more reputational damage than there is financial, but it's the chance of it happening. So whenever they come to the meetings, they are quite animated and they do want to go.
They're incredibly passionate, yeah.
So if I was them, I would withhold the rent if that was the next step, and the only thing I could do.
So I think the impact on the council, I think we need to raise to a 2.
Okay.
Because that reputational.
Yeah.
So it becomes a 4.
Reputation.
I think that's a key one. Anything else on page 6? Page 7. I think within that, ultimately, we don't need to add anything more in because the rest of them sweep that up. Page 8. Nothing snarled at me on there. Did anything snarl at you guys? Can we be a bit more specific on 4.3, where it says untrained manual staff causing injury through bad practice, lack of training? It says it's reviewed annually. Can we put that annual date in, please? Completed review regularly. For 4.2, when's that next due? Actually have some
It's
specific.
done annually.
So again, I think date within there.
I'll put those dates.
Yeah, because then we'd have an understanding of whether we're in date or out of date, or there's, you know, what quantity of people haven't.
Because this should be a live document and anybody going back to it can go, oh, we said. What's the conversation regarding that?
You must have another risk register for all the mandatory training that goes on, so I guess it tied to that.
Um, 4.7. Action required says review investment policy, see 4.9 below. 4.9 below is inadequate maintenance of council historic buildings.
Just noticed that.
Just be confused.
Bad referencing.
Yeah, can we
Apologies.
update that? Anything else, anyone on page 8? Page 9. Appropriately flagged, absolutely. Can we get within the heritage master plan reference? Because I think that's a key part of the control measures that we're putting in and developing. And also mindful that the Guildhall, we're looking potentially over £100,000 there. So I think that actual number needs to be added in. We've got the number there for St Peter's, which is twitchy. You know, urgent works in 2008, and yeah, really as long as a bathroom's been needed to be finished for. Sorry, Mr. James. Yeah, and those are ongoing. Any other questions or comments on that? Page 9.
No.
Okay. Page 10. Can we have a date on the annual review on 4.12, please?
Do that.
So interruption of services market 4.14, loss of income and service provision, viability of other venues has been reviewed and agreed, Lower Carnegie area car park. It says annually, and it's saying no actions required, no one's responsible, and it's not implemented by. If that's the case, does it need to be on here, or do we need to relook at those pieces?
I don't think it needs to be on here.
Okay. So we have a business continuity plan for that.
When I say it doesn't need to be, it would have no impact. Traders would be able to trade elsewhere in the high street, for example, possibly. But
I think we put a business continuity plan in action required.
okay.
What do you think about that, team?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
action required, that's annual ROSPA inspections. I think dates there,
Yes.
4.16. And interruptions of services, again, business continuity plan. 4.15.
I was a bit surprised by 413 in that there's, we're going to formulate and implement a memorial management policy. Surely we've got one, because if we haven't, we can't be green.
We do have.
We do have one.
So we just need to change that wording.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we can put the date when the policy gets reviewed.
Yeah.
Because we obviously do it because, yeah, we have the inspections and some of the gravestones have been laid down because they've been unsafe. So there's obviously a policy there. So, yeah, thank you, Mac. Anything else on page 10, please?
Yeah.
Page 11.
Just a typo in 418, still has the priory, so it's obviously something that needs to be
Yes.
removed.
Yes. we definitely need to remove that because we've taken away that. I think, obviously, as per a previous meeting, we were asked to write to Norfolk County Council. One, has that happened?
I think that's been drafted.
So,
Hasn't been sent, it's been drafted. I wait
Okay.
for the town clerk to come back
okay,
to just do a review.
okay. So if we can update that with the details of the minute item from the Finance Committee meeting last month of that and the actions identified, I think that would be appropriate. What do you think, team?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on page 11, please? And then finally on page 12. Obviously, we had the new risk there of unquantified and unfunded responsibilities from changing boundaries. The town clerk has written to, no, let me rephrase that. Has the town clerk written to the parish clerk of Croxton to see if there are any agreements in place that we need to be aware of?
No, I haven't brought that to her attention. But I think to get something in writing would help us manage our risk.
Okay, can we add that in there, action required,
I should do so.
town clerk to write, and I think it would be appropriate to have that done by the end of this month, really. So if we can put in end of Feb 2023, and then at least then that will prompt a conversation from there. Is there anything else that you guys would like to pick up on there? No.
No.
So with those amendments, are we happy to recommend that to full council?
Yes.
Is that okay? Yes, thank you. So we move on to 68622, which is update on the status of the finance officer's projects. To note the update, is there anything you'd like to say on that?
Two of these are in progress. The credit vetting processes and the new credit control policy is about 60% done. And the utility charges we will have done for the next meeting. We have to put something in place, and one of the reasons it is because I think there's been a little bit of confusion as to the rates and the water and the electricity between this building and our other premises. And so that is getting that right so that we know that it's supposed. We have the data, and that's on the get done soon list, as is the credit control, which is also.
And that dovetails into some of the issues identified within the risk management as well.
I mean, unfortunately, our policy previously was more around payment terms rather than around the actual administration of debtors. So it's taken a fair amount of work to get that right. And to also define responsibilities, because, as who ensures that the market, who comes to the market gets charged. For example, it's not a responsibility of this committee, I don't believe.
No.
It's a responsibility to ensure that what's invoiced is actually collected and that their payment terms for what's invoiced. So I've also had to do a little bit of work around re-looking at responsibilities to ensure that those are clearly set out.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on that, please, team?
No.
Super. So duly noted. 68722 correspondence. Any correspondence come in since?
No.
No. And then 68822 committee officers update. Obviously, we had
the barrister presentation, and I will take some of the points from that and actually put it for our terms factor to consider for our terms of reference, because I thought that investment committee would be very useful. And if I could just comment without it, I mean, we've had no interaction because of COVID. It's been so difficult, and it's actually we've created a communication avenue, and I think we as officers are going to benefit, and we benefit. Hopefully we can bring that to the investment committee and the finance committee, and I think they will also benefit, and that they'll be more in line with what we actually require.
And then obviously the process to complete projects budget and 3-year budget is underway, and those will be tabled at the March
Now
meeting.
we table, the 3-year budget is actually finished, but we need the projects budget to put the movement in research.